So at this point, I'd like to open this up to questions for Stephen. At about 10 minutes to, we're going to have a call from Arthur again, who's going to listen in through Skype. But just continue with your, as if it wasn't even happening. So I'll pass around the microphones. Does anyone have any questions? We've got a couple questions right here. I'll pass the mics.
My name's Anne Livingston. I worked with the Vancouver Area Network of Drug Users for a long time, and we used to have meetings with the people that really drink a lot. And surprisingly, if you held the meeting early enough in the day and people weren't really drunk, you could really get a lot of information from them. I was just curious if anywhere in this discussion of sobering centers where there's a kind of a consumer group that's fought for the centers or has feedback on, I assume Seton House might, or that's my question. Thanks.
Well, in our case, since the center was developed 40 years ago, that was a little before my time, some of those initial discussions that happened. But I know the Central City Concerned Board of Directors actively seeks out consumers, as we call them, to sit on the board. So their voice is an important one.
Well, thank you, Stephen. Lauren Zaptischny in Westminster. Very informative, very interesting. Quick question I had is, could you just cover that funding model that I know you mentioned something about funding from the Portland Police.
Right.
I'd be quite interested just how that particularly works.
Okay, this is our funding model, and I think you'll probably duplicate it exactly. You get the money wherever you can. So the Cheers van, which is really kind of 100% for the police, is paid for 100% by the police. Our detox facility gets city, county, state money, federal grants. The sobering station has been kind of on an interesting ride. For 37 years, it was paid for solely by the county. They recognized that homeless alcoholics and addicts and mental health was their responsibility. Just a couple of years ago, because of that A-type client and B-type client we were getting, they said, well, you know what, that seems more like a public safety issue. We think the city should pick up half. So as of next year, we're only funding you half. The city wasn't too keen on those kind of negotiations, and they said, well, no, we're not interested. So the area hospitals, I think about 7 of them got together and funded that second half for the last 2 years. So it's an interesting, shows you whose bottom line would be affected. The hospitals jumped in and took care of it. That just ended on July 1st of this year when the city did step up. Initially, whenever we did get city money, it was from the Bureau of Housing and Community Development, who was interested in the homeless population. But interestingly enough, now we've got half our funding from the county for those homeless alcoholics and addicts, and the other half is city money that comes straight from the police again. So the police are big supporters. The hospitals were for 2 years. And again, who's going to be funding us in 2 more years? I'll probably have a different answer. But the stakeholders usually come out of the woodwork when we talk about having to close.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very hopeful. And I just want to add to something you said that I found very interesting, and that was to start with gathering data, baseline data. And I totally agree with you, but I don't think they should limit the data to just the individual, but to the impact that it has on the family and their medical issues that have all come out of this, and loss of employment and everything else, because I think the impact is far further reaching than what it looks like when you just focus on the one individual.
I couldn't agree more.
Hi. Stephen Gray here. Just wondered, I know a lot of us struggle when we try to get people into detox who are ready and we can't get them in because there's no available bed. Just thinking about the transition from sobering center to detox, and you've got somebody who actually wants to get in and you can't get them in because there's no bed. I'm just wondering, how do you deal with those bottlenecks? Have you experienced them? Any suggestions?
Absolutely. It's very difficult. Currently, our detox gets about 60 people a day self-presenting to get in. We're only able to take 10. So there's a lengthy triage process where first we take the people who are in the most acute medical need, and then the people who've been returning day after day rise in priority. Usually if you're not in acute withdrawals, then it takes about 3 or 4 days to get in. And we only have the nursing staff to do that triage for the detox program at 7:30 in the morning. So the sobering clients who have a moment of clarity at 3:30 the night before, they have several hours to wait. They'll probably need to be discharged from sobering, go out and self-medicate, and then return to detox. And that's a horrible system. We lose a lot there in that gap. Now, having said that, the people who show up day after day after day are very motivated to get in. It's since it's a homeless population we're dealing with, it's difficult enough for them to get there at 7:30 in the morning, but they also are addicted to drugs and alcohol. So they have to have a certain amount of self-medication on board. They can't have too little of their drug of choice, because then they're in danger of going into emergency and what we're there to avoid. They can't have too much on board, because then they can't cooperate with the process and follow directions. They have to hit that 7:30 mark with exactly the right amount of self-medication, and then we're going to tell 50 of them to do that again tomorrow. So very, very difficult. Now, sobering and detox are sister programs. So when we have one of those sobering clients that we've been working on for months and months, developing that relationship, performing those interventions, getting that trust, and when they finally show an interest, it's a tough choice to try to shoehorn them in over a person who's been returning 4 days in a row showing that much motivation. But sometimes we'll make that decision, because if that sobering client isn't at the sobering station, they are in jail, they are in the ER, they are in the merchant's doorways, costing the system a lot of money. So there can be a lot of bang for the buck getting that sobering client in at that moment. But it can be a difficult decision to make, to tell that other person they're going to have to wait another day.
We'll take one more question, and then I'll dial up our Toronto guest on the internet here.
Thank you, Stephen. Garth McIver, addiction physician with Vancouver Coastal. You have significant amount of housing associated with the CCC. I'm wondering if you have a managed alcohol program within that housing, and if so, how many clients are on that program?
This is getting a little out of my field, but most of our housing is alcohol and drug-free that's associated with some sort of outpatient treatment. However, we do have a program called Housing Rapid Response that is wet housing. It's a housing first model, harm reduction. It's another one that the police are heavily involved with. It's the people who are identified for that are the ones that are continually arrested in the downtown area, and they're giving preference for housing, and there is no requirement that they stay alcohol and drug free. That is it's a program that, as we talked about, has a little bit of controversy attached to it. We are just now starting to experiment with that. David can get my contact information, and I can get you better numbers.
So that's wet housing. That's not a managed alcohol program.
Well, yeah, that would be wet housing. So
alcohol program is where you have an ability to identify some clients that would perhaps benefit from using beverage alcohol as opposed to other sources of alcohol on the street. Have not indicated that they are interested in abstinence at this time. All those criteria are met, and several others. and that you assess them on a regular basis and provide them with enough beverage alcohol to prevent them from going into significant withdrawal?
Yeah, generally our agency, Central City Concern, hasn't really followed that. There are other agencies in Portland that do, and we refer clients back and forth to each other when appropriate. That's not something that we've gotten into too deeply yet. I don't know much about that.